The question that comes to us today is this: do Christians believe in the death penalty? And in fact, the question came to us like this. This question was just asked by two of the members of our class that are in here right now on a Sunday morning a few weeks ago. And so the question is do Christians believe in the death penalty? So as an introduction, the short answer is some do, some don't. Some do, some don't. We might even ask you like this, just instead of saying Christianity or Christians, what about churches? Do churches believe in the death penalty? Well, some do, and some don't. Well, do governments believe in the death penalty? Well, some do, and some don't. So I guess you get my point. So we come to a quandary. So what is the quandary among Christian believers? Why are Christian believers in different places on this death penalty? Well, my first question that I ask whenever I'm thinking about this answer to this question is, where is the authority line and the power of whether the death penalty is going to occur where we live? Where is that authority line and the power? Where does the authority to approve or disapprove of the death penalty lie? Is it in the religion or the church on one side, or is it with the civil government on the other side? Where is it? Does religion influence the government, or does the government influence religion? What about those who do not follow a religion? Where do they fall? Where does their opinion fit into this discussion? Well, Christians and non-Christians are present in every country, every state, every county, every parish, every city, every village, and every community, all around the world. And they have opinions on the death penalty, and they range from absolutely a firm no to a firm yes, and everything and every shade of thought in between about the death penalty. So does religious belief influence how the government functions going that way, or does the religious beliefs impact the government operations? Should the presence or absence of a religious belief determine any part of what's going on in the government? Is it a two-way street, or is it a one-way street, or what is it? Well, with that, I come to another question as I'm thinking about this. What is the Christian's place in the authority line and the power of the authority to do the death penalty? Well, folks, focusing on just the United States for our purpose today, we can say that the United States is a Christian nation because it was founded on Christian principles. Then we turn around and we say, but as laws have been made, has it really stayed a Christian nation? Now, it was built on the idea of the Bible, that the Bible was the ultimate authority for all law. We know that. It is still that way. That's still the way it was built. Now the answer, is it still following those things? And the answer is an absolute no, it's not. Our nation is not following the Bible. Now non-Christians have passed laws for the United States that are not supported by any biblical teaching whatsoever. Three views have emerged out of how the United States government is structured. First, there is the non-Christian view. Second, there is the Mosaic Law view. And third, there is the Christ teaching view. And you would think the Mosaic Law view and the Christ teaching law view, Christ teaching was the same, but it is not. And so we come here to the non-Christian view first. So this is where non-Christians are. The non-Christian perspective opposes mentioning, that's a very important word. It opposes mentioning Christian values, and it seeks to pass laws that conflict with Christian principles. That's the underlying current that occurs. Now, we don't need to explain this view any further because that doesn't answer our question. Now, I could go into deep detail about how the non-Christian view is and what they work on in the whole nine yards and the evil from which they come out of. And some of it's not evil, it's just their opinion, it's their heart, all that type of stuff. That doesn't answer our question. It doesn't help at all with answering our question. So now we need to come to the Mosaic Law view. With the Mosaic Law view, some Christians refer back to the principles of the death penalty outlined in the Mosaic Law. Now, I've got the Ten Commandments up here, but you have to remember the Mosaic laws about the death penalty are more extensive and in several books. In fact, we're going to look at that in just a few minutes. Now, the Christians here that look to the Mosaic Law, they argue that Christianity is a continuation of the Jewish laws given to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, intended then to govern the Jewish societies and all societies that they could influence forever. And since Jesus did not come to abolish one law, but to fulfill them, those laws still apply to Christians and to the church today, and will always do so. Of course, also in those laws are the sacrificial laws, and the sacrificial laws did come to an end, but really did not come to an end with Jesus being the final sacrifice for all sin. Now, folks, that's coming up in another question, where we're going to talk about all the sacrifices and what's the sense of all the sacrifices. So we're going to pause on that and just continue with this topic, that some Christians look to the Mosaic Law and say, hey, it applies to our church today. By the way, that is the front cross on our church where we are today. All right. Therefore, they say, under the Mosaic Law view still, that the United States should evaluate all laws in accordance with and subordinated to the Mosaic Law. In other words, the government should look back to the Mosaic Law. Now, Christians who follow the Mosaic Law see capital punishment as being endorsed, that it's necessary, and that it is appropriate for crimes that were punishable by death and the death penalty in the Mosaic Law. So that's where we get our authority. Not just every crime or punishment, a crime that happens, but those that have been already listed by the Mosaic Law. Well, let's go back. These same Christians also look to the law of the Lord given, get this, 1,062 years before the Mosaic Law, when the Lord said to Noah and his family, when they came off of the ark, the Lord said this. He said, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. So this Christian view looks back and says, okay, if you kill someone and shed the blood of another human, then your blood is to be shed. Now that's the death penalty. Well, in this view, Christians believe this verse applies for all time, all time. They also go over and reference Paul's message in Romans chapter 13 when Paul says, every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Reading on in this scripture, we come down to this. Do you want to have no fear of authority, Paul says? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. It does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is, and I've highlighted this, a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. So here God is the authority over all earthly governments. And God authorizes the sword, which means death, as the minister of God to bring an end to the evil ones on this earth who go about killing and doing things of the sort like that against other mankind. Okay, so that's the Mosaic Law. Now this brings us to the Christ teaching law. So we're jumping past the Old Testament Mosaic Law and coming over into the New Testament and to the Christ teaching. The Christians holding this view focus on the redemptive and merciful teachings of our Lord, which are true and they are there. They take that and they say, and they warn us that the modern judicial system is susceptible to errors and prejudice that could lead to the punishment of innocent people. Make mistakes. They argue that the United States system is completely different from all the ancient Jewish system of the Mosaic Law. In other words, they argue that we cannot trust that our judicial system will find and make sure that everyone who is supposed to be innocent is innocent and everyone who's supposed to be guilty is guilty. So they warn that our modern judicial system is susceptible to errors and to prejudice which could lead to the punishment of innocent people. They argue that the United States system is completely different from that ancient Jewish system, and therefore the Mosaic Law cannot be applied to today's government. This group of Christians advocates for a moratorium on all death penalties. So we've got Christians who believe in the death penalty, and we've got Christians who do not believe in the death penalty. And so under the Christ teaching view, we've got these two perspectives. So let me just go over them again just to highlight what they are. One highlights the government's duty to follow God's law in all cases, especially regarding the death penalty. On the other side, the other perspective aims to stay true to gospel themes, emphasizing the historical tendency of humanity to lean towards injustice within the government system. For mercy's sakes, where do we go from there? Well, I'm going to tell you, we got to go to the Bible. What is the Bible's stance on the death penalty? Here we have it. We must understand what happened in the Bible before the Mosaic Law. Whoever sheds man's blood, we've already read this, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. Before the Mosaic Law, Genesis 9:6 was in effect. If someone killed or murdered any person, that individual faced the death penalty. The cost of taking a human life was the loss of your own life. And shedding innocent blood resulted in the sword of execution. The important point here is innocent blood. Someone coming with the intent to kill you is not innocent blood. If an evil person is headed towards you, guns, knives, whatever, to kill you, that is not innocent blood. The Lord expects you to defend yourself against those with guilty intent to harm others. This is what happens with war. When countries go against countries to take over and to kill people, we are to defend ourselves. The same principle applies here in war. Armies of countries attacking, innocent lives have guilty blood, and must be strongly opposed with deadly force. In war, you should always strive to defend innocent blood, which is exactly what those who want to have a moratorium on the death penalty, they want to protect innocent blood. And so, even though they tend to be the ones who are opposed to war, they do not realize that we are going to war on things to protect the innocent blood, and it may be their blood that we are protecting in their lives. So then we come to with the Mosaic law. Under the Old Testament law, capital punishment is not only mentioned, but also clearly outlined within the legal system that was given to Israel there on Mount Sinai. Now, in your lesson, you have every death penalty verse that is there. We're only going to cover a few. We're just going to cover a few of these death penalty verses so you can get a taste of it. I'm not going to read the name, like Exodus 21:12. I'm not going to read them as I go through. I'm just going to read the text so that we don't take up our time there. He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. He who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. He who curses his father and mother shall surely be put to death. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. That's a sexual relationship. Therefore you are to observe the Sabbath, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall surely be put to death. You shall also say to the sons of Israel, any man from the sons of Israel, from aliens sojourning in Israel, who give any of his offspring to Molech, the god Molech, shall surely be put to death. If there is anyone who curses his father and his mother, he shall surely be put to death. He has cursed his father and his mother. If there is a man who commits adultery with another man's wife, one who commits adultery with his friend's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Of course, that is consensual, is what that is about. Both the husband and the other man's wife are agreeing to that. If there is a man who lies with his father's wife, stepmother's what this is, he has uncovered his father's nakedness, both of them shall surely be put to death. If there is a man who lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed incest. If there is a man who lies with a male, as those who lie with a woman, both of them have committed a detestable act. They shall surely be put to death. If there is a man who lies with an animal, he shall surely be put to death. If there is a woman who approaches any animal to mate with it, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall surely be put to death. Now a man or a woman who is a medium or a spiritist shall surely be put to death. Moreover, the one who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. Moreover, you shall not take ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death. These verses seem strict. However, it is helpful to see the multiple safeguards that the law is also going to build into the issue of determining guilt with at least 2 or 3 witnesses. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 6, it tells us that you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses. You cannot do it just through one witness, one person who acts as a witness against someone who should be put to death. That doesn't work. You have to have at least 2 or 3. In Deuteronomy 19:18, 18 through 19, we find out that there has to be a thorough investigation to prevent wrongful convictions. So we've got this list of things. By the way, there's more. There's on your page that you have there in your notes. There's this list of things that require the death penalty, but also we've got this, okay, you have to have 2 or 3 or more witnesses to say, yes, that person did it. And then you have to do a thorough investigation of those witnesses' character and all of that, plus what has happened to make sure it did happen, so that you can prevent a wrongful conviction if there's just a group of folks out here who hate somebody and want to see them put to death. So how did this happen? How did it take place? What was the process that was put in place? Well, it's over in the Mosaic instruction that's given there at Mount Sinai. And the instruction was this: when the Jews entered the Promised Land, 6 cities of refuge were to be established for the purpose of where people could go to who have been accused of committing a crime, could go to and be taken to a safe place away from the vigilantes until a trial and an investigation all could be held. That's in Numbers chapter 35, verses 6 and 4. This was a significant safeguard that's implemented by the Lord to protect the innocent blood. And I've got that picture there of once that person gets in the gate who is being accused of something, no one can touch them. By the way, it goes on to tell us, I've not got it in your lesson, but it goes on to tell us, if someone comes inside that gate and harms that person, kills that person who's trying to be a vigilante is automatically to get the death penalty, and do it immediately because he has been caught killing that person. So, the Old Testament says the death penalty is the death penalty for the people who have committed these crimes of death, crimes of evil that we've talked about here, and that there are these 6 cities where they can go to, run to, get into, where the cities will protect them until they have had a trial after an investigation to prove whether they are guilty or innocent. By the way, that is the way that our justice system in the United States is now set up. So, now let's come to the New Testament message here with the government authorities. The New Testament draws a connection between fairness of this penalty and compassion and the governing authorities. It mentions mercy and love and turning the other cheek. However, it does not reject the idea of legal punishment for certain wrongdoings. Let's look in Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 4. For every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. So Christians have a God-given duty to uphold justice. The sword symbolizes the punishment for the same crimes that were listed here earlier under the Mosaic Law, in fact. Each which warrants the death penalty. Well, now we come down to Jesus, what Jesus has to say about revenge. So we hear the words of Jesus, what he says here, Matthew 19, chapter 5, 38, 39, where he says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also." This is a verse that clearly contains an instruction not to seek revenge. Not to seek revenge. We are not supposed to seek revenge. But if you also remember in the story of the woman supposedly caught in the act of adultery, and the man who was there to be accused at the same time, Jesus came along and he said this, "He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." However, this is in John chapter 8. Jesus is speaking to the crowd. He is not speaking to a court of law, and that's very important. It is Jesus' warning against vigilante justice, advocating against taking the law into your own hands, and instead of, he's encouraging the pursuit of proper justice. Capital punishment had a place in Jesus' world, but not in the streets where a mob is issuing the death sentence. Do Christians believe in the death penalty? Well, as I told you, some do, and some don't. And with that, we come to what I want to say to you in this final statement, just to sum it all up. Because Christians are people of the Holy Word of God, we support capital punishment only after all the proper avenues of justice have been followed with safeguards in place to protect the innocent. Now here's the thing. There are people on both sides of what I'm about to say to you. There are people on the side that says when a person has killed someone, they don't even need a trial. Just put them to death. That's not what the Bible teaches. They must have a trial, a correct trial, appropriate trial, investigated fully. And of course, with all the things that we have today, we can go back and we can track where their cell phones were, where they were. We can track their charges, where they bought this or bought that. We can track where they've been. We can track where their cars have been. We can see where they bought gas. We can do all of that. Proper investigation. We can see when they landed at the place or arrived where they killed the person. We can see that. Then we've got the other side that says, no, you don't understand. This is a human being. This is a human being. So we shouldn't impose the death penalty. We just should put them in prison for the rest of their lives. Well, to that I say this, and I know you've got other questions now that I've taught this lesson. Well, what about this? What about this? Our government of the United States does not install the death penalty for all the things that we've read in the Mosaic Law. Well, we got that answered. We got that answered in that we follow the laws of our government about the death penalty here because they are ministers of God for our time. That doesn't mean that the Mosaic Law is done away with. It just means that the people who are in positions of our government at this point in time have made laws and they have struck some of the Mosaic laws. They have struck them, okay? Incest is no longer a death penalty issue in our government. Taking your mother-in-law as a sexual partner is no longer, with a consensual partner, is no longer a death penalty issue. A man lying with a man, like he lies with a woman, in our government is no longer a death penalty issue. So these issues have been taken away from the Mosaic Law. But you must understand that that law was given for the Jewish nation there at Mount Sinai, and for it to have an impact on our world. And whether you like it or not, folks, that Mosaic Law was what our government was based on. And in fact, we have the tablets of the Mosaic Law at our Supreme Courthouse still today. They are still there. Well, with that, we understand that our government organization has made changes to what the beliefs of the Bible are for our government in the United States. So, should Christians believe in the death penalty? The answer is absolutely yes. After all precautions have been taken, and it is clear that a person has taken the life of another, and that person's blood should be shed.